Ma'am, step away from the patient. Now. Nurse Serena Hale's voice cut through the emergency room like a knife. She didn't ask questions. She didn't check credentials. She saw a black woman in casual clothes near a dying patient and made her assumption. Dr. Nadia Voss lifted her hands from the patient's neck where she'd been checking for a pulse, blood pressure dropping, pupils dilating. This man had minutes before brain damage became irreversible. This patient is experiencing acute subdural hematoma, Nadia said calmly, her voice steady despite the chaos. He needs immediate cranial decompression or he'll... Security? Serena shouted, not even letting her finish. We have a situation. Have you ever been so certain about someone that you didn't even consider you might be catastrophically wrong? What happens next will leave you speechless. The assumption. The Memorial Hospital emergency room operated on organized chaos. Monitors beeped their urgent rhythms. Gurneys wheeled past with practiced efficiency. Doctors and nurses moved with the synchronized precision of people who'd seen everything. But they hadn't seen Dr. Nadia Voss. Not yet, not like this. She'd arrived at Memorial Hospital that Tuesday morning wearing what she always wore on her first day at a new facility. Jeans, a simple navy blazer, comfortable shoes. No white coat, no ostentatious display of credentials. Just a doctor ready to observe, assess, and understand the culture before making her presence officially known. The hospital board had hired her. Chief of Surgery, Memorial Hospital, the youngest person ever appointed to the position. Years of neurosurgical excellence at Johns Hopkins, Stanford, and Mayo Clinic. Published researcher, award-winning educator, the kind of surgeon other surgeons called when they needed a miracle. But standing in the Memorial Hospital ER, watching a middle-aged man collapse near the triage desk, Nadia wasn't thinking about titles or credentials. She was thinking about the classic signs of intracranial hemorrhage she just witnessed. The man, white, business casual attire, had been complaining about a headache when his knees buckled. The triage nurse was on her phone. The security guard was checking someone's visitor pass. Nobody was moving fast enough. Nadia moved. She dropped her leather portfolio and crossed the feet between her and the patient in seconds. Her fingers found his carotid artery. Weak pulse, rapid. His skin was clammy, pupils asymmetric. Battle signs starting to appear behind his ear, bruising that indicated skull fracture. Someone paged neurosurgery, Nadia called out, her hands already positioning the patient's head to maintain his airway. This patient needs a trauma surgeon now. That's when Nurse Serena Hale appeared. Serena had worked Memorial Hospital's ER for years. She'd seen homeless people try to steal medications. She'd dealt with mentally ill patients who became aggressive. She'd removed family members who got too emotional during critical situations. And when she saw a black woman in street clothes hovering over a white patient, her assumptions filled in a story that her eyes hadn't actually witnessed. Ma'am, step away from the patient now. Nadia looked up, meeting Serena's eyes with the same calm she maintained during surgeries. This patient is experiencing acute subdural hematoma. He needs immediate cranial decompression, or he'll suffer irreversible brain damage within. Security, Serena shouted, cutting her off. But what Serena didn't know, what nobody in that emergency room knew, was that the woman she was currently treating like a threat had literally written the textbook on subdural hematomas, the one used in medical schools across the country, the one sitting on Serena's own supervisor's desk. Two security officers appeared. Ronan Webb and Declan Richardson had worked hospital security for a combined years. They approached the scene with practiced weariness. "Ma'am," Ronan said, his hand moving to his radio. "We need you to step back and let the medical staff handle this." Nadia stayed exactly where she was, her fingers still monitoring the patient's pulse. I am medical staff. This patient has minutes before. She's not medical staff, Serena interrupted, her voice rising. I know everyone who works this ER. She just walked in off the street and started touching patients. The patient's breathing became more labored. His pupils were definitely unequal now. Classic signs of increasing intracranial pressure. Nadia's internal clock was counting down. Listen to me very carefully, Nadia said, her voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. This man's brain is bleeding. Without immediate surgical intervention, he will die. You can verify my credentials after we save his life, but right now someone needs to page the on-call neurosurgeon and prepare OR for emergency craniotomy. Doctor? Tariq Morrison, a third-year resident, pushed through the growing crowd. What's going on here? This woman, Serena gestured at Nadia like she was evidence in a crime scene, came in off the street and started diagnosing patients. I've already called security. Morrison looked at the patient, then at Nadia, then back at the patient. His training told him to check vitals first, ask questions later. He knelt beside the patient and began his assessment. Pupils unequal, Morrison noted aloud. Battle sign present. Possible skull fracture with intracranial bleeding. He looked up at Serena. Get me a CT scan stat and page Dr. Henderson in neurosurgery. Nadia felt a small relief. Morrison was doing his job correctly. But then Serena's next words made her realize this situation was far from resolved. Dr. Morrison, should I have security remove this woman before she interferes with more patients? What nobody had noticed in the chaos was that Dr. Morrison had paused because the woman kneeling beside the patient had just described with perfect clinical precision a diagnosis that had taken him years of residency to learn to spot, and she'd done it in seconds. Morrison stood up slowly. Ma'am, are you a physician? Yes. Which specialty? Neurosurgery. Serena scoffed. Right. And I'm the hospital administrator. Dr. Morrison, please let security handle this so we can actually treat this patient. But Morrison was looking at Nadia differently now. Something in her eyes, the calm, the certainty, the way she'd positioned the patient's head to prevent aspiration. These weren't the actions of someone pretending to know medicine. What's your name? Morrison asked. Dr. Nadia Voss. The name meant nothing to him. He was a third-year resident. His world consumed by his own patients and his own training. He didn't follow the hospital politics or administrative appointments. Ma'am, Ronan Webb said, his patience wearing thin, we're going to need you to come with us. You can explain your situation to hospital administration. The patient's breathing became even more shallow. Nadia could see his level of consciousness dropping. Officer, in minutes, this patient will experience herniation syndrome. His brainstem will compress. He will stop breathing. And your hospital will have a wrongful death lawsuit because everyone in this room chose to argue about my credentials instead of saving his life. The cold clinical delivery of that statement made everyone pause. Call Dr. Henderson now, Morrison said to Serena. Something in Nadia's tone had convinced him. Tell him we have a possible subdural hematoma with rapidly declining neurostatus. But Serena wasn't ready to back down. Dr. Morrison, with all due respect, we cannot let random people walk into our ER and start making diagnoses. She could be anyone. She could be mentally ill. She could be black. Nadia finished quietly. The word hung in the air like smoke. The thing about prejudice is that it rarely announces itself with burning crosses and slurs. It hides behind professional concerns and proper procedures. It dresses itself in the language of safety and protocol. And right now, in this emergency room, everyone was watching it play out in real time. Serena's face flushed. That's not what I meant. I'm just following hospital protocol. Your hospital protocol? Nadia interrupted, her voice still maddeningly calm. Requires all medical personnel to identify themselves upon entering clinical areas. I was walking to administration to do exactly that when I witnessed a patient collapse. Your protocol also requires any qualified medical professional to render aid in emergency situations, which is what I'm doing. She turned to Morrison. Dr. Henderson won't get here in time. You need to intubate now to protect his airway and prep for emergency burr holes if his pressure doesn't stabilize. Morrison hesitated. She was right about the immediate priorities, but he was a resident. He couldn't just order an emergency craniotomy based on the assessment of a woman whose credentials he couldn't verify. Look, Ronan Webb said, trying to find a middle ground. Let's all take a breath. Ma'am, if you're really a doctor, you'll have credentials. Show us your hospital badge or your medical license, and we can sort this out. Nadia reached into her blazer's inner pocket. What she pulled out made everyone in the immediate vicinity freeze. It wasn't a hospital badge. It was a wallet. Expensive leather, European-made. And inside, clearly visible, was a medical license from the state of Maryland. Dr. Nadia Voss, M.D., Ph.D., board-certified in neurological surgery. But there was something else in that wallet. A business card. Simple, elegant, and devastating. Morrison was close enough to read it. His eyes widened. Memorial Hospital Chief of Surgery, Dr. Nadia Voss. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes earthquakes. Morrison's face went through several shades of pale. Serena couldn't see the business card from where she stood, but she could see Morrison's reaction, and it terrified her. Dr. Morrison. Serena's voice had lost its certainty. What is it? But Morrison wasn't looking at Serena. He was looking at Nadia with the expression of a man who just realized he'd been casually chatting with a legend while standing in her living room. You're the new chief of surgery. Serena's world stopped spinning. The patient. Nadia reminded him gently. We can discuss credentials after we save his life. Morrison snapped back into action. Right. Yes, absolutely. He turned to Serena, his tone now carrying an edge of panic. Get me intubation supplies now, and someone page the OR to prep for emergency craniotomy and find Dr. Henderson and tell him the chief of surgery needs him immediately. Serena stood paralyzed, her mind trying to process what she just heard. Chief of surgery. The woman she'd called security on. The woman she'd dismissed as a random person off the street. The woman she'd prevented from helping a dying patient. Nurse Hale. Morrison's voice cut through her shock. Move. Serena stumbled toward the supply cabinets, her hands shaking. Ronan Webb and Declan Richardson exchanged glances. They'd been in security long enough to recognize when they'd made a catastrophic mistake, the kind that ended careers. Nadia had already turned her full attention back to the patient. She directed Morrison through the intubation with the precise, calm instructions of someone who'd performed this procedure thousands of times. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, supporting the patient's head, monitoring his vitals, watching for the subtle signs that indicated whether they were winning or losing this race against brain death. But here's what everyone was about to learn about Dr. Nadia Voss. She didn't just save individual lives. She fixed the systems that endangered them in the first place. The patient was successfully intubated. His vitals stabilized enough for transport. Dr. Henderson arrived, a pompous senior surgeon who'd been with Memorial, and nearly had a heart attack when he saw who was directing the patient's care. Dr. Voss, we weren't expecting you until the board meeting this afternoon. We'll discuss my arrival later, Nadia said, her eyes never leaving the patient's monitors. Right now we have a subdural hematoma with mass effect. He needs decompression. Or ready. Yes, ma'am, I'll scrub in immediately. I'll be joining you, Nadia said simply. Henderson started to protest. New administrators didn't typically scrub in on their first day, but one look at Nadia's expression told him this wasn't a request. As the patient was wheeled toward the elevator, Nadia turned back to the ER. The crowd that had gathered was still processing what had happened. Serena stood frozen near the supply cabinet. Morrison looked like he wanted to apologize but didn't know where to start. The two security officers had quietly moved to the periphery, probably hoping everyone would forget they'd been involved. "Nurse Hale?" Nadia said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet ER. "We'll discuss what happened here after surgery, Doctor. Morrison, please document everything. The patient's arrival, the initial response time, the delay in treatment, all of it. I want a complete timeline." She paused, letting her words sink in, and someone please call the hospital administrator. "Tell them Chief of Surgery Voss has arrived and there are going to be some immediate changes to protocol." The surgery lasted. Dr. Henderson assisted, watching in quiet awe as Nadia's hands moved through the patient's skull with the precision of a sculptor and the confidence of someone who'd done this exact procedure so many times it had become meditation. Evacuating the hematoma, Nadia narrated for the benefit of the surgical residents who'd crowded into the observation gallery. "Notice the midline shift. This is why speed matters in these cases. Every minute counts." The patient's brain slowly expanded back into its proper position as the pressure was relieved. The monitors stabilized. What could have been a death or permanent disability was now looking like a full recovery as Nadia sutured the final layer. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. The OR nurse checked it for her. A text from hospital administrator Ronan Mitchell. "Meeting in my office. Bring legal." Nadia smiled beneath her surgical mask. "Tell Mr. Mitchell I'll be there, but he might want to bring legal too." In the ER, Serena Hale sat in the nurse's break room, her hands shaking around a cup of coffee she hadn't tasted. Her supervisor, Layla Martinez, sat across from her with an expression that mixed sympathy with professional disappointment. "Serena, what were you thinking?" I didn't know. She wasn't wearing a badge. She was just standing over a patient." "And you assumed the worst because of what? Because she was black? Because she wasn't in scrubs?" "No, that's not... I mean..." Serena trailed off, realizing that yes, that was exactly what had happened. She'd seen a black woman in casual clothes, and every assumption after that had been colored by that initial perception. The chief of surgery. "Serena? You called security on the chief of surgery. How was I supposed to know?" "Nobody told me she was starting today." Layla pulled out her phone and showed Serena an email. Subject, "Welcome Dr. Voss." Sent to all staff with a professional photo of Nadia in her white coat. Full credentials, start date, and a note about her open door policy. Serena's face crumpled. I deleted it. I get so many emails. You didn't read it," Layla finished. "And now a patient's treatment was delayed. We have a potential lawsuit, and the new chief of surgery's first impression of our department is that we're either incompetent or racist, maybe both." The meeting in Administrator Mitchell's office was scheduled. Word had spread through the hospital like wildfire. The new chief of surgery had been blocked from treating a patient on her first day. Security had been called. There were whispers of discrimination, lawsuits, mass firings. The truth, as usual, was more complex and far more devastating than the rumors. Nadia arrived at Mitchell's office, still in her scrubs from surgery. She'd taken time to wash her face and pull her braids into a professional bun, but she deliberately hadn't changed into professional clothes. She wanted everyone to remember that she'd been dressed casually when this happened, not because she was unprofessional, but because she'd planned to observe before announcing herself. Ronan Mitchell was a career hospital administrator, MBA from Wharton, climbing the healthcare management ladder. He'd hired Nadia specifically because the board wanted someone who could transform Memorial Surgical Department from good to exceptional. He just hadn't expected the transformation to start this dramatically. Doctor. Voss Mitchell stood as she entered. I want to apologize on behalf of Memorial Hospital for the incident this morning. It was completely unacceptable and it was revealing. Nadia interrupted, sitting down across from him. Which is more valuable than you think? Mitchell paused, recalibrating his approach. I've spoken with Nurse Hale and security officers Webb and Richardson. They're all prepared to offer formal apologies. We can arrange for counseling if you experienced any trauma from Miley. Mr. Mitchell? Nadia's voice was patient but firm. I'm not interested in apologies from individuals. I'm interested in fixing the system that made this morning possible. She opened her leather portfolio and laid out several documents. This morning, I witnessed systematic failures at multiple levels. A patient collapsed, and initial response time was slow because the triage nurse was distracted. When I attempted to render aid, I was immediately perceived as a threat rather than a potential helper. Security was called before any attempt was made to verify my identity or credentials. And even after I explained the medical emergency, institutional protocol was prioritized over patient care. Mitchell winced at each point, but said nothing. Now, Nadia continued, some people will want to make this about Nurse Hale's individual bias. And yes, her assumptions were problematic, but the real issue is that our system allowed those assumptions to delay life-saving care. She slid the first document across the desk. This is a statistical analysis of patient outcomes in Memorial's ER, broken down by patient race and treating physician race. Notice anything interesting? Mitchell studied the charts, his face growing pale. Black patients treated by white physicians have a longer average wait time before treatment begins, Nadia noted. Black physicians report higher rates of credential challenges and patient reassignment requests. The patterns are statistically significant and legally actionable. We didn't know this data existed because nobody was looking for it, Nadia said. But I was. I've spent the time since accepting this position, analyzing Memorial's data. This morning's incident wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom. The revelation hit Mitchell like a freight train. This wasn't just about one nurse's bad judgment. This was about institutional patterns that could destroy the hospital's reputation and create millions in liability. What do you propose? Mitchell asked, his administrator's brain already calculating the political and financial implications. Nadia opened her portfolio wider, revealing a comprehensive reform proposal she'd been developing. First, mandatory implicit bias training for all patient-facing staff, not the generic online module that people click through without thinking. Real training, with real consequences for failure to complete it. Mitchell nodded, making notes. Second, revision of our credential verification protocols. Any staff member who questions a physician's authority must follow proper channels, not security calls, not public confrontations. There's a difference between appropriate verification and discriminatory harassment. Agreed. Third, establishment of a patient advocacy office with direct reporting to the board. Patients and staff need a confidential way to report discrimination without fear of retaliation. Mitchell hesitated. That could open us up to a lot of frivolous complaints. It could, Nadia agreed. Or it could help us identify and address problems before they become lawsuits. Your choice. Continue. Fourth, demographic analysis of patient outcomes becomes a standard part of our quality review process. If we're seeing disparities in treatment times, surgical outcomes, or patient satisfaction based on race, we address them immediately. Nadia pulled out another document, a detailed implementation timeline with budget projections staffing requirements, and success metrics. This can be implemented. Phase 1 begins immediately with staff training. Phase 2 involves protocol revisions. Phase 3 establishes the oversight infrastructure. Memorial Hospital can either be known as the place where the chief of surgery got called security, or the hospital that became a national model for equitable care. Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, studying the proposal. What about Nurse Hale? The security officers? Nadia's expression was unreadable. What about them? Do you want them terminated? Do you? Nadia countered. Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. I think their actions warrant serious disciplinary measures. Their actions, Nadia said carefully, warrant education. Suspension? Yes. Mandatory retraining? Absolutely. But termination, that just makes them martyrs and doesn't fix anything. She leaned forward. Here's what I learned in years of surgery, Mr. Mitchell. You can remove a tumor, but if you don't address the cancer, it just comes back. Nurse Hale's assumptions about me weren't unique to her. They were learned. They were reinforced by a system that allowed them to flourish. Fire her, and the next nurse makes the same mistake. So what do you propose? I want her to stay. I want her to complete intensive bias training. I want her to shadow our black physicians. I want her to write a detailed report about what she learned, and then I want her to help train every other nurse in this hospital. Mitchell stared at her. You're giving her a second chance. I'm giving her an opportunity to be part of the solution instead of the problem, Nadia corrected. People make mistakes. The question is whether they learn from them. She stood up, gathering her materials. Mr. Mitchell, this hospital hired me because you wanted to be the best. That doesn't just mean the best surgical outcomes. It means the best for everyone who walks through these doors. Regardless of race, regardless of insurance status, regardless of how they're dressed when they arrive, I understand. Do you? Nadia paused at the door because this morning a patient nearly died because people were more concerned about who had the right to help than whether someone needed help. That can never happen again. Mitchell nodded slowly. I'll have the board approve your reform proposal at tomorrow's meeting. I'm counting on it. The transformation wasn't immediate. Change never is. But after Dr. Nadia Voss scrubbed in on an emergency surgery wearing jeans and a blazer, Memorial Hospital looked very different. The lobby now featured prominent photography celebrating the diversity of their staff. Black physicians, Latina nurses, Asian administrators, everyone who made the hospital function, represented and recognized. Nurse Serena Hale completed her retraining program. She stood in front of new employee orientation now, telling the story of the day she called security on her own chief of surgery. Her voice shook every time, but she told it anyway because that shame, that embarrassment, that reckoning with her own biases had taught her something no diversity seminar ever could. I saw a black woman in casual clothes. Serena told the room of new nurses, and I filled in a story. I decided she was a threat before I asked a single question, and because of my assumptions, a patient's care was delayed. I could have killed someone because I was too busy being suspicious to be curious. The new nurses listened with wide eyes. Dr. Voss could have had me fired. Instead, she made me learn. She made me understand. She made me better at my job. Don't be me that day. Be better than me. Ronan Webb and Declan Richardson went through similar journeys. They now led security training on de-escalation and appropriate credential verification. Their signature module, how to verify authority without profiling. Dr. Tariq Morrison became one of Nadia's protégés. He'd been the only person in that ER who'd actually listened to her clinical assessment before knowing who she was. That ability to recognize expertise regardless of packaging made him exactly the kind of physician Nadia wanted to develop. The patient Nadia saved that morning, Barrett Williamson, insurance executive, made a full recovery. He sent Nadia flowers every month with the same note. Thank you for being there when assumptions almost killed me. Memorial Hospital's patient outcome disparities dropped in the first year of Nadia's reforms. Staff satisfaction improved. Patient complaints about discrimination fell to nearly zero. The hospital won national recognition for its equity initiatives, but Nadia's favorite change was the smallest one. In the ER, right above the triage desk, a new sign hung in simple, bold letters. Medical emergencies don't ask for credentials, neither should we. The real story. This isn't just about one doctor proving herself. This is about a system that automatically questions Black authority, about assumptions that cost lives, about the difference between punishing individuals and fixing institutions. Dr. Nadia Voss could have destroyed careers. Instead, she built a better system because real power isn't about revenge. It's about transformation.